Hey guys, we're on day 7. So this morning, the prophecy that you're going to read is Psalm 78, verses 2 through 4. And that is a psalm of Asaph, was the psalmist here. And then we're going to read in Matthew 13, verses 33, I think it's 34, and 35. And I titled this, and I don't want anybody to think it's snarky, but if you've done my studies before, you'll get it, because this is kind of my sense of humor. But after I studied this one, I was like, even the parables, people, even the parables are prophecy. So join me in reading that prophecy and the fulfillment of that in Psalm and then in Matthew. This is what Psalm 78, 2 through 4 says. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not conceal them from our children, but tell to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wondrous works that he has done. And so this is telling us that ahead, that Jesus will fulfill this. Messiah will teach in parables. I mean, have y'all read this before? I mean, this is just so good. Then you read Matthew 13, verses 34 through 35. And so if you want to do a little extra reading, if you read Matthew 13, he starts with the parable of the sower. And then in verse 10 of chapter 13, the disciples even say to him, it says, and the disciples came and said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? You know, they didn't even get it. The disciples didn't get it. So he teaches the parable of the sower, and then he goes on and does the wheat and the tares. And then after that, he does the mustard seed and the leaven, the hidden treasure, the pearl of great peace, the dragnet, the householder. He teaches all these parables in Matthew 13, and the disciples are there, and they're even wondering, why did you teach in parables? But listen to what Matthew records in verse 34. It says, all these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. And so it was the plan all along that Jesus would teach in parables. And even the disciples had a question about it. But I have a question about it too. You know, because have you ever read all these parables? It is. I mean, you have to really think. You have to dissect things, all those things. And I kept thinking to myself, you know, why is that? You know, if I have the question too, I'm with the disciples. Why did he teach this way? But the one thing that we need to see is that he was teaching to multitudes. Remember that these huge crowds would start to follow Jesus, and they wanted something, you know. And so the one thing that I want us to see in this is that this is prophecy fulfilled, that he would teach this way, but also that Jesus is God. He is the deity. He is part of the Godhead. Jesus is God. And even when he was on earth, he was the God-man. And so we see here that when those multitudes would come, not only would he come and would Jesus have mercy and teach them, he also knew their hearts and their minds. He knew their intentions. He knew why they were following him. And so what he would do, he would teach in parables. And the thing is like those who had spiritual ears, those who had the intention to really know him and learn of him, they would learn. I'm convinced they would learn, because why? The Spirit's doing that work in the heart. The good soul is there, just like one of the parables that he taught. But those who were just wanting a miracle, wanting to say, you know, wanting to sit and say they sat under him, those who had the wrong heart, they didn't hear it. The parables were no good. And so even the disciples were struggling though. And so they asked the question and Jesus had to explain it to them. So you see, if you read all of chapter 13, that Jesus did that. But this is what John MacArthur said. He said, parables require more explanation. Jesus uses them to obscure the truth from the unbeliever by making it clearer to the disciples. You know, it took a minute, but Jesus was teaching those who wanted to hear, those who had spiritual ears. That's who he was talking to. He didn't give some seeker-sensitive message, even though the multitude was there. Why? Because he's God. He knew their intentions. I love that. And then I love what William MacDonald said too. He said, Jesus spoke the first 4 parables to the multitude. This method fulfilled this prophecy, uttering things kept secret from the foundation of the world. From the foundation of the world. So what we need to remember there is Jesus wasn't just a good teacher. He was God. He was God. And so he was fulfilling a prophecy here. Even the parables, people. Even the parables.